What I was hearing is not what I wanted to believe. Most parents that I've spoken to, they have been told what your son or daughter will not do. And I also knew I had someone different, and they didn't know me either. And so I was convinced that Luke was going to do more than what we were told because of who the two of us are.
Welcome to the Experience Miracles podcast, where we help parents find hope, answers, and drug-free help to overcome your child's chronic health challenges. I'm your host, Dr. Tony Ebel, and I'll be sharing my experiences as both a dad and a doctor on every episode. I can take the latest science and neurology of healing and break it down in the most simple and relatable way possible. We'll take on the toughest topics and answer your biggest questions through interviews with other amazing parents and leading experts, leaving you with practical action steps that you can take to help your child heal and thrive. It's time to expect and experience miracles. Let's get started. All right, y'all, this episode is one of those conversations that is going to leave its mark. Today, I had the honor of sitting down with Tim Siegel, a father who has walked through every parent's worst nightmare and came out of it with a mission far bigger than himself. In 2015, Tim's 9-year-old son, Luke, was in a tragic golf cart accident that led to cardiac arrest, severe brain trauma, and a life-changing journey that no family ever expects or wants. At that time, Tim had just stepped away from his 23-year coaching career at Texas Tech to spend more time with his wife and 4 kids. And just 20 days later, their whole world was flipped upside down. But what came next is what this episode, what this platform, what this podcast is really about. That relentless fight forward no matter what. The love, the unbelievable strength that Luke showed, and the way that Tim turned this unimaginable pain into purpose through his Team Luke Foundation, which now helps thousands of families navigate brain injury and trauma with support, resources, and hope. And they have an incredible conference you'll learn about that I'm coming down to and able to make it to the first time this year down in Texas this fall. So we'll put those links in the show notes because you got to really stay to the end to hear about that Team Luke Hope for Minds conference that's coming up in October, and how you can play a role in not only getting there and learning and helping your family, but perhaps supporting other families who are walking this road and need help in that way as well. I'll finish this introduction and then let the interview roll here from the perspective I always have promised you from episode number 1 that I would share from in addition to my teaching mode that I come from as a nervous system focused, nerdy, neurology loving doctor. And that's dad mode. This one was really something for me. This was a conversation of 2 guys who know a lot now about brain injuries, about neurology, and about recovery, and about community, and about what moves the needle. But 2 dads. This is a 2-dad conversation whose kids have gone through traumatic injuries and had different outcomes. And so because I was so blessed to be able to intervene along with the medical system literally right away for my son Oliver and his hypoxic brain injury, his outcome has truly been a miracle. But every story, every child is a miracle written in its own way, designed to create purpose and impact and change the world for other kids and other families in its very own unique way, no matter what the net outcome is. So I want to speak specifically with this final part of this introduction to a lot of you out there who are listening who, because of the level of injury, because of the level of genetic challenges that your child faces, that quote unquote full recovery, 1000% health may not be the final destination for your child's story. But forward progress still absolutely positively can be a vastly, markedly, ridiculously improved quality of life for your child and your family. Far more confidence, far more empowerment, far more purpose, and a connected community of empathy, compassion, and support is absolutely available to you through the PX Docs platform and this podcast. So if you ever feel like, you know what, they're almost too hopeful, they're going for such an incredible, unbelievable, indescribable outcome. If you've ever felt like we've taken it too far and you might want to tune us out as a result of that, I get that. And Tim gets that more so than anybody else. But I want you to stay tuned in, because the reason that we're going to speak with such unshakable confidence and certainty is not just the story that God has allowed me and so many on this platform and this podcast to walk through, but because I know that so many others that are going to come onto your healthcare team are going to do the opposite. They're going to try and take hope away. They're going to try and take the label and the diagnosis and the injury and give you as limited of a forward path as possible. So forgive me, please, if we very intentionally, strategically, from our heart and from our head, go fully to the opposite, because we just want to continue to pull you, push you, encourage you, champion you forward, no matter where you are today and no matter how far forward can truly take you. Let's all work to push forward together. Tim, my friend, fellow father, and just a guy who likes to get stuff done and make impact and serve families in every way you can. Welcome to the podcast. When I first got into all the different incredible communities and places that are out there, and we've been serving for 17 years, you get a lot of opportunity to reach parents, to work with other providers, to hear about conferences and organizations. And once you get a lot of that, Tim, you kind of start to learn how to get a good read on, man, who's just all in, who is just so wholly, entirely called by God, relentlessly committed to serving these kids in these cases. And let's just say what we're talking about here, and we'll talk about, and tough cases too, really, really tough stuff that go through oftentimes, most times, back into a really tough traumatic story. A lot of intricacy within the brain and the nervous system, and how we're going to get this healing going, and all the things. So as a fellow dad, who my son Oliver had a traumatic birth injury, his hypoxic injury hit right at birth. And, walking that walk through all these things, obviously, your story and everything you've done with your incredible organization, just, I don't know how to say it. It hits me, square in everything. And so if you could, brother man, if you could take us back by sharing Luke's story from that dad and parent perspective, and we'll get into, in the best of ways, we'll get into the action, we'll get into the organization, we'll get into the conference. But what we love to do on this podcast is share from dad first, doctor nerd second. And so if we could kind of start you off in dad mode, could you take us through Luke's story and how that moved in this direction?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. And I really appreciate this and getting the word out. I was a tennis coach at Texas Tech for 23 years, and I decided in 2015, July 8th of 15, so 10 years ago, to spend more time with my family. I had, at the time, an older daughter from a previous marriage, but then I had a 12-year-old daughter, a 10-year-old daughter, and a 9-year-old son. And so I made the decision on July 8th of 2015 to resign from Texas Tech, primarily to spend more time with my kids. All of them played sports, volleyball, cheer, basketball, and then Luke was a big-time baseball player at the age of 9. And 20 days after I resigned, so July 28th, 2015, 10 years ago, I got a phone call that no father ever wants to receive. I had taken over as the middle school and high school tennis coach, which I was going to do until Luke graduated from high school. And I was at the tennis courts at the high school, Lubbock Cooper in Lubbock, Texas. And I got a phone call that Luke was in a golf cart accident at a friend's house. I got to the scene of the accident, and the helicopter was hovering above. The ambulance was just taking off, and I was told immediately get to the hospital. About 5 minutes after arriving at the hospital, I was told that the golf cart that Luke was on landed on top of his chest, and he suffered head and chest trauma, was in cardiac arrest for 7 minutes. So he did have, obviously, an anoxic brain injury. And the first night or two were very much touch and go. And Luke, 44 days into multiple surgeries later, we were transferred to Cook Children's Hospital in Fort Worth, where we spent 4 months. And 5 days after we arrived at the hospital, we were told, we were in a room with therapists, nurses, social workers, and the last person to speak, the neurologist, told me, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but based on Luke's MRI, he will never use his limbs, use his voice, or open his eyes. you can imagine what my wife and I were thinking at the time, but I just knew that he would do more than what we were told. But it was in November, just before Thanksgiving of 2015, when Luke made his first sound. And eventually, not enough to warrant staying at Cook Children's. And 5 months after the accident, we came back to Lubbock, and I became Luke's primary caregiver. I spent basically every waking hour with Luke. I was his night nurse 5 nights a week. I was taking Luke to PT, OT, and speech. I was just one of those dads that was just so convinced that Luke was going to do more than what we were told. And so juggling a wife and 3 daughters and even grandchildren while also taking care of Luke was challenging. But I just knew that at some point, Luke was going to respond to me in a way that nobody would have expected. And amazingly enough, it all happened about 15 months after the accident. I would ask Luke to blink, but didn't know if that was really Luke blinking or not. I'm from New Orleans, so I'm the biggest New Orleans Saints fan you've ever met. And Luke was the same way. And so I actually remember asking Luke, do you think the Saints are going to win today? Move your tongue. And he moved his tongue. And from that point on, I said, okay, I've got this. Luke is responding to one command. This is just the first of many. And so we went from, Drew Brees sent Luke a video, and the Saints organization has been amazing. Patrick Mahomes wears the Team Luke bracelet on his right wrist because of his involvement with Texas Tech. And so there's a lot of people that are supportive, but I always mention those athletes to Luke. Elvis Andrews, the Texas Rangers shortstop, was Luke's hero in baseball. So those guys, I think, helped Luke. But I know this, that Luke with PT, OT, and speech, and Luke did other therapies as well as stem cell, laser therapy, hyperbaric oxygen. We drove every week for 2 years to Fort Worth to get on the Locomat robotic machine. We did everything we possibly could to help Luke get better. But I think the greatest therapy Luke received was love. And that love came from his family and really from me. And I feel like, I was dad, but I was also coach. I knew that I could coach Luke up. And Luke went from making sounds, because I would say, Luke, can I hear your voice? And then he would make a sound. And then I would say, Luke, I love you. And he would say, So he was speaking to me. And I was so convinced that Luke was going to do things that not only the doctors didn't expect, but nobody would have expected. And, Luke was doing really well. But in 2021, middle of August of 2021, Luke got COVID. And I was naive, but I thought, well, Luke's going to overcome this because he's overcome everything, and we're going to change the world together. And so there's no way that he's going to pass from COVID. August 15th or so is when he got COVID. They sent us home, not even to the hospital. I didn't like what I saw. I had to give him extra breathing treatments. Took him to the ER on August 18th of 2021. And I remember keeping Luke. Luke was in the hospital with his mom, and then I came back to the house. I got a knock on the door, get to ICU at 4 a.m. And on my way to the hospital, I heard a voice, you're going to be okay, but Luke's not going to make it. And I fought that until I got to the hospital, and the first person I saw was the doctor, and she said, I don't know if your son's going to make it. And I said, I know. And on August 19th, 2021, at the age of 15, Luke passed away. And as I'm talking to you, I mentioned earlier, July 28th, 2015 is when Luke had his accident. And so that 10-year, the month of July is a very difficult month for me, only surpassed by the month of August. But, and the irony there is that when I was a college tennis coach, I loved July and August because it was my chance to breathe.
It's your breather.
And to reset. But what I will say in closing when it comes to Luke's story is that, I always thought Luke was going to speak, but he is speaking. He's just speaking right now through me. And I finally became someone that understood how important it was to forgive. I do a lot of public speaking, and I have 7 inspirations from Luke. find your passion, don't ever quit, lean on friends and family, make good choices, be careful, have faith, find forgiveness, and let a loved one's legacy live on through you. But that number 6, find forgiveness, that was a hard one for me. And I finally forgave the family, and that was on August 3rd of 2023. So we're coming up on 2 years where I finally forgave, and it freed me. Yeah. And I'm in a much better place. But I will say this, that anger and bitterness is no longer part of my life, just sadness. Yeah. And I wish it was just sadness because it's overwhelming. But I also know that Luke is making an impact every day and is inspiring people all over the country every single day.
Yeah, that word, if we could, sometimes when I'm writing articles or preparing a keynote or a podcast, buddy, I'm a nerd, and I'll want to say something that is most impactful to the audience that'll listen, and I'll go to thesaurus.com and I'll say, hey, what's another version of this word that would maybe carry even more weight? And I bring that up here, Tim, because every single one of your words there, every single component from where it was to where it's still is just going full speed today. There's no words to describe the level of impact that Luke truly has on this world. Continuing, the momentum continues to build. I think if you were ever to maybe take a moment and just think of all the voices, plural, massive, that are now there bringing Luke's story, bringing this healing, bringing this hope, bringing these connections to these kids and families throughout the whole world. You probably could never even get done with the list, right? You'd forget 100 people or 1,000 people that are now involved in this mission as you go forward from it. So I don't know how to say that other than just it is just something that, when you try and put it into words in the best of ways, it's not easy to do. What I'd love to do here, Tim, is go back just a little bit. Now, as a dad, 6 weeks in the NICU, what was it, day 3, we had a very similar, neurologist statement. He's only got a 20% chance of living to age 1, 99% chance. He'll have cerebral palsy and autism. He'll never walk. He'll never talk. He needs all these medications. You'll want to put him in all these therapies. And Tim, that doctor only said 99% because who says 100? That's just a figure of speech. But he meant 100. And I remember having the same mentality you had in that exact moment was, honestly, and I don't know how to frame it other than it was in my head, and is just not him. Not him. Not out of disrespect, not out of lack of understanding of the severity of his brain trauma and anoxic injury and everything else, just out of like, we're going to figure this out together, buddy, man. We're going to figure this out, Oliver. We're going to, and it was us and our family, and we just teamed up. So there was some sort of just different wiring that was ready to activate in that moment that I would have never known was inside me as a dad until it was, until the button got turned on. If you look back into your incredible family and to your relationship those first 9 years with Luke, and the amount of love, the amount of dadding, the amount of coaching, the amount of pouring into him that you did, and I'm sure he did to you. Oh, gosh, I don't quite know how to ask the question I'm trying to ask here, buddy. I'm not a professional podcaster as much as I'm just a dad. Do you feel like so much love, so much relationship, so much togetherness prepared you for the storm that was coming so that you could go head down and be ready to take it on?
Well, that's a great question. I've been asked similar question. I think that my experience as a tennis player, as a professional tennis player, traveling the world and playing all the Grand Slams, and so dealing with all of that and the discipline, the dedication that it takes, and then being a coach for 23 years, I think in some ways, and I'll tell you this, I was with Luke, and he was in his wheelchair, and we were at a basketball game, and this woman, I've never had anyone walk right past us without at least acknowledging us. Maybe a sympathetic hello. Can I pray for your son? This woman had her head down and walked right past us. As she turned around 5 feet after, she said to me, "You were chosen for this." And she walked away. Well, I do believe that maybe, just maybe, because of all that I've dealt with, and because there's nothing more important to me than being a father. I am the father right now of 3 beautiful daughters and a son in heaven. And I left Texas Tech to be with my children. My identity was never being a coach.
Yes, sir.
My identity was being a father. And finally, after having 3 daughters, I have a son who, A, loved sports as much as dad does.
Right.
Loved the New Orleans Saints, the Texas Rangers, the things that really mattered, but also a sweet, kind-hearted young boy who got along with everyone. Yeah. And then we had such a bond over sports that, from the New Orleans Saints and the people in the organization, Drew Brees especially, it was a special thing. But my son was very unique, and he just had such he had a way about him that he made every one of his friends feel like they were his best friend. And I'll never forget the third grade teacher. She came into my house after the accident, and she handed me a piece of paper. And I looked at it, and it said, "Dear Mrs. Julian and Mrs. Cross, I'm really sorry for how I behaved today. I apologize. I'll get better." And I said to his teacher, "What did he do wrong?" And she said, "Nothing. He didn't want the class to miss recess." Here's a 9-year-old, maturity-wise, he had such a sweet soul, an old soul about him. But, and I can tell you that he is right here in my heart. He is in a lot of people's hearts. Yeah, he is. I have a tremendous following on Facebook, Luke's Legacy. Pray for Luke Siegel. We have over 70,000 followers. And when I write something about Luke or something about a family who's going through a lot, it may be shared a number of times and reaches over 100,000 people. Yeah. So for that reason, I'll never stop, because I know that Luke continues to inspire.
That's right. One of the sign off, the hashtag, the imprinted on our hearts and soul with this mission is every kid counts. And that's how we look at it. Every video, every podcast, every article, every post, every reel, every whatever we put out there, man, if it finds one, well, there you go. That's what's up. You know what I mean? That's where the calculator lights up, and what we were called to here through the Lukes and through the Olivers and through the Tims and through the Tonys. That's how we operate. Parent for parent, ready to serve. So if we can, going into that, because, the other part of me, it's dad first, and it's, holy cow, am I a nerdy, neurological, brain-based, obsessed doctor, nipping right on the heels here, Tim. That's how God made me and constructed me there too. So I know for sure, I had this awesome cheat code, if you will, when Oliver's injury came in, that I was already in clinic doing work for traumatic brain injuries and had put out a lot of these clinical protocols. So there was this kind of like starting on second or third base healing component for Oliver that I know was a real difference maker for him, right? And what I also know is not everybody else gets to kind of start with that knowledge. And if you don't have that knowledge and that understanding, well, then how do you take the action? And sometimes the action feels like, oh man, it came so far down the road later. I wish we'd have known X. I wish we'd have known Y. I wish we'd have known Z, because we would have done X, Y, and Z. So if you think back to those first 5 days, those first 4 months, the hospital, and now you also being this just ready to rock, link up with your little boy and go after it in healing. What did you find first? Did you as a parent get really sciencey and really nerdy and neurological? Like, did you want to know all of those things right out of the gates? Were you seeking info, or was it more you were seeking people that knew what you needed to know, or both?
I would say it was definitely both, okay. Because what I was hearing is not what I wanted to believe.
Yeah, I understood.
Right?
Yeah.
And most parents that I've spoken to, they have been told what your son or daughter will not do.
That's right. Yeah.
And I also knew I had someone different, and they didn't know me either. And so I was convinced that Luke was going to do more than what we were told because of who the two of us are.
That's right.
And when a doctor says to me a week into the accident, "Do you want to continue?" I looked at him like, "What are you talking about? Continue." And so, and you also hear things like, well, the first 18 months are when Luke is going to make his most progress. I'm here to say that year 6, Luke made his most progress. And he made his most progress because of all those therapies, but also because I spoke to Luke, and Luke and I were together. And the love that Luke received was more powerful than any therapy, or at least as powerful. And so, to answer your question, certainly science, yes, to some degree. I listened to some people that knew what they were talking about, but I also dismissed that to a degree.
Yeah.
Because I said to myself, okay, God, together, we're going to do this together. And when the neurosurgeons told me in Lubbock after the fact, weeks later, they said to me that they did not expect Luke to live the first week, and they certainly did not expect Luke to ever make a sound or to respond to a command. And so that told me that what they believed based on an MRI was only based on an MRI. And I even remember telling a doctor, I don't give a damn about an MRI. I care about what I'm going to do for my son. And the thing too is when you have an anoxic, a global injury, the fact that Luke was globally damaged, you can't get worse than globally damaged. And yet I'm here to tell every parent that reaches out to me that I'm not going to tell you what your kid can do because every brain injury is different. But what I can tell you is what we accomplished. What we accomplished to give hope to families, that to believe in what you're going to do, what your children can do, because I've seen miracles every single day, certainly since 2018.
Every single day. Okay. So let me ask you this, because I think this is something that is, I think parents innately, naturally would want to do this too, but I wonder if sometimes they talk themselves out of it with kind of taking this as the lead horse in decision making. When you were looking for doctors and providers on Luke's team, were you looking for as much of a shared mentality and attitude of said provider, regardless of their initials or their resume or the size of their clinic or whatever? Were you as invested in somebody's coming onto Team Luke only if they have this same, buddy, we're going to prove them wrong, we're going to do things they said you couldn't? Was that a big part of decision making as to who gets a jersey and who gets on Team Luke?
Well, let me back up and just tell everybody about Team Luke. So, we started Team Luke Hope for Minds in January of 2018, and we are currently in 47 states helping families through education, through financial support, our conference coming up, which we'll talk about later. But what we do is we help families whose children had a brain injury post-birth, right? From strokes after birth. Certainly we see the most with non-fatal drownings, car accidents at home, ATV, golf cart like my son. We are receiving, families are reaching out to us every single day. And obviously the most of them are reaching out for financial support. But what I think families have learned, and certainly our staff has learned, is that what we provide more importantly than even financial support is simply education, is what I'm able to talk to parents about. When a parent tells me that their son had an accident 4 months ago or even 4 years ago, and this is what their son is doing or their daughter is doing, I'm encouraged because they are even farther along sometimes than my son even was at the very end. So, and I'll tell you this too, is that it's so isolating, right? And I know you felt this, when as many friends as I have all over America, I felt like I was the only one around because I'm taking care of Luke 24/7. But I also knew that I needed others in my life. I needed to be able to talk to others. And so I would reach out to, whether they were in science or whether they were just a friend or a family. I needed to be reassured some things, but I also had this, once again, maybe I was naive. I just believed that Luke would get better because I believed in God and I believed in my faith. And I just knew Luke could have been taken in day one. He was very likely to go that first night. And here we are now. He lived 6 years. And he continues to inspire and impact so many famous people, athletes, tennis players, Andre Agassi, Andy Roddick. All these tennis players have done things for Team Luke. But it's also, I have this, Luke's favorite number is 3. And I have this saying now that I remind myself, and that is 3 words, fight like Luke. Yeah. And I remind families to fight like Luke. And I also remind myself that when I'm telling families, I've got to remind myself to fight like Luke, because it's very easy for me to feel overwhelming sadness. But I just believe that Luke is speaking to me as I'm speaking to you, and he's given me the strength. In some ways, I coached Luke, and Luke is now coaching me.
I was just going to say, brother, Luke knew you as well as you knew him, and Luke knew, and God knows that knew knows the two of you perfectly orchestrated together, and God knew and knows that he made for both of you for forward movement. He made both of you for impact. And so what I believe to be true in my real time, interpretation is Luke said, Dad, you're at your best moving forward. You're at your best charging forward. You're at your best, going against the grain and making impact, serving others, right? And doing that. And so still today, more so today and more so tomorrow than today, there's just that continued hard to describe impact and connection that is happening all over the world through Team Luke, through the organization, through your team, through your speaking, through your content, through your conference. Like it's literally, it doesn't go on a calculator. You just can't add it up. It's incredible. And that's how God makes the Lukes of the world. And that's how God makes the Tims of the world. And everybody, so many of you listening, every single one of you listening, not so many, that was the wrong terminology there. Every darn single one of you in this world, that's what God knew about your child and your path and you in that seat as well, is you are made for impact. Fight like Luke. Let's go. So the mix here, Tim, my kind of, and rounding a little bit of third, I'm a big baseball guy too. Absolutely obsessed and live that world. So kind of rounding second, rounded third here a little bit. What I find is the most impactful, the most effective kind of combination algorithm to serve families is a mix of hope and emotions and not skipping past any of it. Not skipping past the sadness, not skipping past the struggle, not skipping past the questions that I know they're asking deep inside, just being there for them, being the most amount of compassion, the most amount of empathy, the most loud, probably over the top, naive, medical doctors would certainly say, who do you think you are? I want to get grief from people who don't believe. I want to get grief from people who don't have faith. I want to get grief from doctors and others who don't think kids can heal at a level that no one else. Because if I'm getting grief from those turds, then I'm doing something right. If I'm over the top with hope dealing and getting that out there, okay, I've checked that box, and that box freaking matters. Well, the other box that comes in combination is neuroscience. Truly, now I put my nerd hat on, I put my clinician hat on, and I go, okay, not only do I have this hug for you, not only do I have these words of encouragement for you, we've got things that we know work. We've got healing sequences. We've figured out so much with the brain from, oh my gosh, I won't nerd out on this episode per se, but that's what we do all the time on this podcast. Like, we know exactly where these injuries set up shop. We know about, proprioception and saturation and oxygenation, and we know how to turn that sucker back on. And so what we've done as best as we possibly can with the experiences and the kind of gifts and the platform God has given us, brother man, is we put those two together full out. Hope and science. Hope and answers come together with the help. So you are perhaps the most courageous hope dealer I've met. Where today, and I know it's going to feel a little bit like an abrupt left turn here for a second, bud, but neuroscience, if you were to literally just say, okay, in a couple of minutes, now that I know what I know from all these interventions, all the things we did for Luke over the 6 years, all the things you're seeing other families do, and they're very connected with you guys, right? You get the scoop, you get the story as to what's working and what's don't, or what may not be, working to the same degree. Where do you find the neurological needle is being moved most? And I know that's not a very fair question because there's so many things and every kid is so different. But if you just had to kind of, go through the list, what would be on your list?
Well, I was always asked, what therapy helped Luke the most? And my answer is all of it.
True.
If someone said to me, if you walk to New York, Luke will get better, I would have tried it.
Yep.
I tried everything. And as I mentioned earlier, from stem cells to laser therapy, the red light therapy to hyperbaric oxygen. And some would raise their eyebrows and wonder, are those things helpful? To PT/OT speech. I believed that all of those things mattered, and some maybe have helped more than others, but it was hard for me as a parent while I'm doing all of that and also getting on that Locomat, the robotic machine. I do know this, that Luke and any child with a brain injury is not going to heal by sitting in a wheelchair or laying in bed. And so I wanted Luke upright all of the time. And I really did push Luke as if I was coaching him.
Yes.
And I pushed him hard. We did all those things from acupuncture, you name it, we did it. But I do believe that getting upright and movement and being out in the sunlight and all of those things and talking to Luke, I treated Luke like he understood everything, that he was healthy. And the only way that's going to work is if you are working him to get better. And so we did that every single day, being on a stander, pushing him, stretching him. When your body, obviously, when Luke's arms would look like this, and to stretch him out. And I knew based on Luke's eyes how he was doing today. There are so many things I learned. And listen, unfortunately, Luke's passing cost me a marriage. My wife and I divorced 2 years ago, but we have a wonderful relationship to this day. And she's a nurse practitioner. So here's someone in medicine who wasn't always sure, is this going to help Luke, or is this going to help Luke, or is this going to help Luke? But I also knew this. She saw the amount of work that I put into it, that Luke did make improvements, regardless of whether she was convinced or skeptical about whether something was going to work or not. Look, every day I'm learning more now. And hearing you today, honestly, makes me sad. You know why? Because I wish Luke could be with you today. I wish we could do, because the fact that it's been 10 years since the accident, but 4 years since he passed, there are things that, I'm hearing about that we never tried, that we never did, because I didn't know about it. Yep. And so I'm very open to that. That's why I enjoy our conference so much, because I'm learning as well, and hopefully giving that information to parents.
Well, that's what I told you before we started recording is, you know what, buddy, man, I'm coming down and I'm going to do exactly what God and Oliver have crafted me to do. I'm going to deliver my keynote. I'm going to break down the neurology. I'm going to teach parents stuff they probably haven't heard of before, because unfortunately the work we do is, one, wildly transformative to brain and nervous system healing, but two, we've done a terrible job of getting the message out there. So that's on us. I have always, and this is just how God crafted me too, brother, man. Like I like a weighted backpack. I like to bear responsibility. I feel like that is what God has really called men and fathers to do, in that way. So I look at that and I say, you know what, moms and dads out there, if you haven't heard about this before, don't carry a single ounce of that. That's on us to get this message to you. So that's the perfect segue, my man. I can't even believe that I get to come down there and teach. I'll be there with the biggest smile on my face. I will be there well rested, well adjusted, nervous system regulated, ready to be at my best. And I will also be there just like you, my friend. I'm going to be there with my notebook. I can't wait. You know what? Dr. Crawford, he might be nerdier than me, and all these other sort of folks that are there. And I'm just going to sit front row and I'm going to bother them in the hallways and I'm going to ask them questions about this, because I've got patients where we might have figured out X and Z, but Y still jamming us up, And so I'm so excited for this conference. So let's go there as we do officially round third base on this incredible conversation, and definitely not the last time our community is going to hear of your community, my friend. We're going to link arms and serve and experience miracles all together for decades to come. The conference, let us have it. How long has it been going? What is the main, I love the connections. I know there's going to be individual, incredible presentations, but isn't it really just about it's a gathering. It's a support flipping warehouse on steroids, right? Where the providers, gosh, I'll even sneak this in here, dude. We need support too. Sometimes you take on the toughest of cases. I was joking with my team the other day. I was like, you got anybody with uncomplicated low back pain, that I could go see? It was like 17 seizure cases in a row. And I was like, I just need Bob with back pain for 15 minutes, just to kind of a little hit off the tee, right? On that one. And so anyways, tell us about the Connections Conference, when it is, where it is, how people can hear about it. I know it's full steam already, but it'll go down each year and we'll be there helping out.
Well, the conference is, Team Luke Hope for Minds started in 2018. I had Team Luke and Rhonda Johnson, my partner, had Hope for Minds. We merged in 2018. So, Rhonda had that conference the year before that. So that conference started with 1 day and now it's a 2-day conference. And there are 3, 4, 5 speakers every hour. But you know the name of the conference? The name of the conference is called Making Connections. And that's what happens in those 2 days. Those families that are there are in a safe place. Those families know that everyone that's there gets it. And that's so powerful. And I think what happens is the parents are talking to each other and finding out, what do you do for nutrition for your child? Or what do you do for this? And that is so wonderful to see. You know, I remember getting up at the conference last year, and I started out by saying, if my son did not have an accident on July 28, 2015, there is no conference. There is no Team Look Out for Minds. And this conference takes place this year, October 24th and 25th in Austin. And we are currently we've scholarshiped over 70 families. Last year, we had over 160 families attend. We have a campaign going right now where people can contribute, because we have over 15 families on a waiting list. But we want to be able to get every single family. This is our Super Bowl. This is our opportunity to make a difference. There is nothing more powerful. And I'm almost sometimes worn out after those 2 days, because I used to be there as a dad and as a executive director.
Yeah.
Now I'm there as an executive director, but I always tell people too that you're going to feel Luke's presence here, you know. And I want to share too with your audience that in March we came out with a documentary. It's called Hope Beyond the Diagnosis, and it's on YouTube. And that documentary is so powerful. It's a 50-minute documentary, and we have some celebrities on there, of course. We have Dr. Phil is in there, and Patrick Mahomes, and some tennis players, and of course Drew Brees. But we have families sharing their story from the conference from last year. And I think that is something that people will really learn a lot more about Team Luke and what we do each and every day. Because listen, Team Luke Hope for Minds is like any other nonprofit. We are trying to raise money to be able to help every single family. And when we have families reaching out every single day. TeamLukeHopeForMinds.org. You can go on there, and whether you want to contribute or just learn more about us. And so it's an amazing opportunity for us to help others. But that conference, I'll tell you this, you're going to be so blown away by everything, because Rhonda Johnson, my partner, is really the MVP. She's the most important person in our organization. She does so much, and she's putting on this conference and already gathering speakers and who's going to go. It is amazing. So that is on October 24 and 25 in Austin.
Yeah. I'll sing full back up on that, buddy. Again, being blessed to be in this world for 17 years, the Defeat Autism now, the Autism One conference was in my backyard in Chicago. And again, if there's about 1,000 million of these examples that I can give, if I ever was like, you sure, God, this is what my calling is? It was always held on Oliver's birthday weekend. He was born Memorial Day, 2009, and they hosted that every Memorial Day. So it was such an incredible honor of service. I would bring Oliver down there even as a baby, he'd be in the stroller and I'd be speaking and he'd be meeting these communities. And Oliver's story has been one of triumph and incredible healing. He's now 16 and, cardiorespiratory and brain damage, and he's running a 450 mile. And he's just like, so him being there is as much of, right? It's like, there it is. We're going to this. And so anyways, this conference is just exactly about that, bringing everybody together. But I know organizations, and what I don't know is how the heck you and Rhonda and your teams pull it all off, because the documentary, what you have going on Facebook, the resources on the website, and that's just what people can see digital. And then I get to serve a bunch of your families that you guys serve. I get to adjust them. I get to, see them every week and pour into them. And, the stories they tell me of how you guys have impacted their lives, like, those aren't stories I get to hear from other organizations. And I'm not blowing smoke at you. You're not a appreciate smoke kind of fellow anyways. And so this is just an impactful organization, everyone listening in. And so from me as kind of chief hope dealer of this one here with the Experience Miracles podcast and the PX Talks platform, we're going to pepper the show notes with those links and go there, contribute, learn more, get engaged. I know so many of the families listening, you will be well served by this incredible organization. And I know so many families listening, you are at a place where you can really serve the organization to serve through to these incredible families. And especially the way we're doing this, we want this one to come out at just the right time to really get engaged in the scholarships to the Making Connections Conference. And I'm going to be down there in Texas. Thankfully, you don't hold it in the summer, because I don't know if us Midwesterners, I don't know if I can handle July, August in the Texas heat. And also, if it's your Super Bowl, I'll close in jokes, because this is how I roll, buddy. Can a Vikings fan come down? We don't do well in Super Bowls. Am I still allowed, down there? So,
well, let me tell you something. I don't want to hear about the Vikings, because that Minneapolis miracle against my New Orleans Saints, I haven't forgiven you for that.
Look what you did to old man Favre down in the championship game the year before.
Well, that
was
true.
Our title, buddy.
That is true. He threw that interception. Thank goodness. I want to also add one more thing, that people can go on YouTube and look up A Father, a Son, and Their Saints. It's an ESPN story about Luke and Drew Brees and the Saints. And also, I've written 2 books. My first book is called It's in God's Hands. It sort of chronicles being a caregiver. And then my second book came out in end of 22 called Fight Like Luke, Transforming Grief into Love, Strength, and Faith. And because my son's favorite number is 3, I feel like there needs to be a third and final book. And that book may be about how I've healed. And I could see that coming out maybe sometime next year.
Man, I can't wait. I can't wait. Buddy, I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours. And I know we're officially first getting to meet here. And, both of us been working in this same direction of serving these families and impacting lives. And every dang day we get up, we move forward, and we serve more. I cannot wait to meet you in person and serve alongside you. You'll get the best of me and our crew, full speed, full send, as the teenagers say down there. And can't wait to hang out. We're so grateful for you joining us on this podcast. Everybody listening in, let me say it one more time. Go after each and every single one of those resources. We will make it easy. We're going to pepper the show notes. We're going to send it in our email newsletter. It's going to be all over Instagram and Facebook and our website. So get after it. Tim, God bless you, sir. Impact maker, brother from, a Red Raider Nation to a Cyclone fan up here. Let's keep getting this good work done every single day and do it together. Sound good?
Thank you so much for having me. Take care.